better suited towards that anti-bullying stance,
Right.
that don't have to have anything to do with how a family is formed or getting into any of those ethical issues.
Right.
And if you're a state school, that's probably where they should stay.
Yes.
I don't believe a state school is somewhere where we should be indoctrinating children into any kind of, and that's what I feel it is, indoctrinating children into different lifestyles.
Pushing it. Some people
And
say
pushing
that some say that Australia is, because Australia is a signatory to international treaties which
Yes.
actually guarantee the rights of parents to raise their children in their own faith, which means these values, and some are concerned come at it from this point of view that it's an incursion in personal freedom.
Sure. It's a
And
good way to
as a matter
frame
of
it.
fact, I may just mention that I'm coming from a meeting with a school principal, and I know that when the Liberal Party was asked, well, what is your position on this? On these, they said some of the answers has been, I heard this answer from a federal level and also from a state level, that it's a decision for the school to make. Well, when I asked the principal, how would a school make this decision? What would be your consultation?
Sure.
They said the principal would decide.
Oh dear.
In other words, I don't see what kind of a choice it really is when you think of
Yes.
the school body, because presumably it's going to be fairly diverse. And there are going to be parents there, so I don't understand. That doesn't seem to be a very plausible excuse that
No,
schools are
it
making their own
doesn't.
choices. The individuals, principals
Yes.
are making their choices.
Yes.
So that's a worry.
And I guess the DLP as well, we believe in decisions being made by the lowest factor. So in schools, we think school boards should have much more of a say, rather than it something being handed down, being top heavy. It should be much more of a grassroots approach.
Well, I mean, this is also a very... People think when they use the term state school, they think of a secular entity.
Yes.
But the fact is that 70% of Australians identify with some particular religious denomination, and presumably those children are going to state schools. They're not just going to religious
quite often,
schools.
Yes.
Many parents might not be able to afford, the fees for a private school, but they still have values, and this would be true, I presume, of migrant groups as well.
I would think that would be quite a big truism for migrant groups. Yes.
So it's a very... Now another issue which comes up is that which the policy which Labor has announced with regard to education. They have said that they will reverse the existing legislation and take away the exemption which religious schools have to in regard to discriminating in the appointment of staff. In other words,
Yes.
if the staff have a lifestyle values or beliefs or something of that sort. Now, it has been traditionally the prerogative of the school to say we'll pick teachers who harmonise with our ethos, our school ethos.
Yep.
And the Labor Party says, well, you are going to have to justify each and every one. But it seems to me that they don't really understand the way a religious school works, that they may think that a maths teacher's job is just to teach maths, and what difference does it make what he says or she says or acts or lives or shows or says about anything else? But it seems to me that a school, a religious school, has an ethos. You've got to model it as well as teach it.
That's very true.
Do you have that as a box
I agree. And I think it's strange that they want to take that away from religious schools, but at the same time, they're not taking the exemption away for themselves. So their secretary or their gardener on their property can't be a Liberal Party member, for example. So they can make those kind of distinctions in their workplace, but not in a school environment where parents are paying for a particular type of education. So if I'm a Buddhist and I'm putting my child into a Buddhist school, I'm expecting a certain standard of education.
It's strange for a party which prided itself on multiculturalism to be cutting into different cultures like that.
Yes. But it's okay for them to discriminate in their staff choices. So it's an inconsistent approach.
How do you think the grassroots would react to such a policy? How what would schools do if they were suddenly told that they've got to justify their individual appointments before a secular tribunal? I mean, what do you think would happen?
I think it would cripple some schools. I know a lot of smaller private schools are struggling. They don't do it for profit.
Right.
They don't do it because they're trying to make a lot of money. they're in it for the love of their children. And I think it would cripple a lot of schools, that they would start to wonder whether they can expand or whether they can keep going. And I think that's very sad.
Might hit at their morale too, and their whole vitality.
True. Yes, yeah. It certainly would make it a struggle.
Right.
And a lot of parents, I believe, sacrifice a lot to put their children into a private school. It's not just people who are wealthy who do that.
Right.
So I think, it could be affected in the ways that school fees will go up, because more administration burden is put on schools that have to continually be justifying appointments. I just don't think the Labor government has thought it through. I just don't think they've thought through the implications either. And I think that's one thing the DLP would want to expose, the implications, not just for schools, but if you're going to do it for schools, you're going to take exemptions away from other areas. Right. And that flow-on effect, that snowball, is just, I don't think anyone from any kind of religious background is going to, or non-religious background, is going to support that.
Now the DLP comes from a something of a religious tradition, if I'm not mistaken. I know that it's you have now embrace a wider scope, but there is a Catholic background, and there are, to what extent do religious values and consciousness actually figure in the DLP?
It's a really good observation. We have been known to be the Catholic Party, but leaders in the past have been Protestant, and we have. When we were first formed, we were a secular party. So a couple of months ago, I went to a lecture at an atheist society. It was on Bob Santamaria and the DLP. So I thought, this will be interesting, they're just going to trash us. So I went along, and besides the observation that the DLP has a lot of bitter old men in it at the present time, which I was able to stand up and say, well, I'm neither bitter nor old.
Nor a man.
Apparently not a man. The person who was delivering the talk was very fair towards the DLP, and he had said he was a member of the DLP and he's an atheist. And I've had a lot of interaction with that society since. So the DLP has a wide appeal to people with strong values. Yes, we do have the Judeo-Christian values, and we are founded on that. And yes, we do have a lot of people from different faith traditions embrace us. But we also are being embraced by the secular pro-life movement, for example, which is starting to build in Melbourne, which we encourage. Yeah.
Now, you may be aware that the review of the national curriculum, which came out recently, recommended a return to the certain principles of what's called the Melbourne Declaration. I don't know, when I say return to them, I don't know if those principles were ever implemented. But that declaration had spoken about the importance of spirituality in the lives of children.
Sure.
So, obviously, in the state school, you have to have a certain neutrality. In other words, you can't impose a uniform faith education by definition. It's a state school.
Sure.
But what about students who really, let's say their parents cannot afford to send them to a religious school, but they are religious homes, they're children for whom spirituality is important. And as a matter of fact, the Melbourne Declaration said that really spirituality is important potentially for everybody, whether they take it up or they don't take it up.
Sure.
How could education in state schools cater for those students and those families who want a spiritual component in their child's education?
Sure. I think that's where we need to retain the religious education element in state schools. I think that's where the chaplaincy program really plays a large role, and chaplains in state schools come from a lot of different faiths and are trained to embrace that role in that way. And I think teachers would need a bit more training as well. The university system doesn't train teachers to recognise necessarily that spiritual element of a child. And you and I would know that our children are spiritual beings as well as emotional beings. And we teach a little bit about how to deal with the emotions, but I think we should be teaching student teachers about how to deal with that spirituality aspect as well.
Well, Let me ask you a personal question.
Sure.
What is the bee in your bonnet? What drives you in your
What
drives you in your political goals, if I may ask?
It's a really good question. I worked in welfare for 20 years before deciding I wanted to do this foray into politics, I suppose. And welfare I thought was very political, and it is, actually. And I guess I was continually in like middle management positions, and then I moved into academia. And, you know, academia is wonderful, and I got to write a book and, you know, talk about philosophy and theory and those kind of things. And my particular area was disability. But I felt that to make a real difference now, at the point in my life that I am now, I thought politics was it. So I wanted to make a change in legislation, to influence legislation. So my background in welfare and in disability particularly have set me in good stead to want to change the abortion laws, for example, to help people understand the role of vulnerable people in society. And I was a member of the Disability Reference Group at the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission for a while, and that was really eye-opening to see the variety of different complaints that came up and the breadth of concern that people had. And oftentimes I felt that if we had better policies and better awareness in that political and public space, we could make more of a difference. So that's where.
And how will small parties like the DLP become big parties?
Yes.
But how are you reaching out? How are you getting out the message? I mean, this DLP was, of course, a more sort of larger party once upon a time, but it's now going through a rebirth.
We were, yes.
So how do you find what's life like at the coalface there with people? How are people responding to what you're saying?
I think it's a bit of a two-sided coin. On one side, people are very enthusiastic about a minor party with solid values. The ALP and the Liberal government, it's very hard to tell the difference sometimes, and people are very disillusioned with that. So they're looking for a solid alternative, and they respond well to the DLP message. At the same time, there's a suspicion around minor parties, particularly when there's some antics in the federal sphere with the balance of power, and people kind of wonder if that's what all minor parties are going to be like. So we have that kind of dual, that we're dealing with, but we get our message out very much on a grassroots level. So
maybe the small parties will also have the fun, just like the Greens tugged the major parties, let's say, in one direction. Maybe the small parties can tug the major parties back into the moral centre of something of that sort. That would be that's where voters could express that ambition too.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we decided to make a difference. We needed to accumulate our votes together with other like-minded parties. Right. So we started those conversations. So at this stage we only have 3 parties in our alliance, but it's a strong alliance with Rise Up Australia and Australian Christians. And I think next time that alliance will expand and we'll have a much more cohesive group of small parties.
But let's hope that we don't have to be so long term.
Yes.
That in the short term there will be some very solid results.
In the short term, a few victories in this state election where the minor parties that hold these solid Christian, Judeo-Christian values hold that balance of power.
Maybe I could add also Muslim people will also support you. This is maybe we could expand that expression to Abrahamic religions and beyond, because they will want to be part of this too. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we would, absolutely, and that is a very good term to use. Yeah, for sure.
Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.